And welcome back, everyone, to the Pokemon Team Creation Series from, who was it? Let's see here. Kenya Smith? That's the question. What is Pee Wee Hermans? Ah! Pokemon Team. I can't. I can do this. I can do the nasally Pee Wee Herman voice when he's talking normally a little bit. A little bit. But that voice, that kind of scream that Pee Wee Herman used to do, Paul Rubin used to do, can't do that so well. I didn't grow up on Pee Wee's play. I know who Pee Wee Herman was. I knew that. I very much was aware of Pee Wee Herman, but I never watched Pee Wee Herman. You know, like I remember Pee Wee's Big Adventure, things along those lines, but I was never like adamantly watching Pee Wee Herman. So it was just kind of there for me. But still, that doesn't mean I can't do a Pee Wee Herman video. There's been plenty of characters who I didn't watch any of their stuff, yet I can do a video on them. So Pee Wee, though, is really problematic in terms of making a Pokemon team for, because when we really break down his personality, dislikes, and likes, there's actually not a lot to go on to determine Pokemon teams. Like, he's very childish, despite being a guy who's, well, we never know his true age, is somewhere in his, 30s. So he's very childish, very immature, but he's beyond that, he doesn't actually have a lot going for him. That said, though, he does have a lot of accessories, tricks, and most importantly, friends that we could make a team with. So let's get started. And the first one we're going to start with is actually basically an item. And the biggest thing about, I believe, the Pee Wee's Big Adventure, the first one is I'm trying to get my bike. And so Cyclozar is a bicycle. Technically it's a motorcycle, but it's more a bicycle than anything else. Koraidon and Miraidon are closer to actual motorcycles, particularly Miraidon. But yeah, I think this one makes total sense. It's also, friendly Pokemon he can make a friend with. And I'm going to reiterate that point right now, because looking up all the characters on Pee Wee's Playhouse, which is where I got most of the ideas for this team, do you realize that half of the characters were literally just the house itself? Like, literally, window, floor, food in the refrigerator, the armchair. Like, seriously, when the floor is a character, I think you might be really stretching the boundaries of disbelief here, folks. So yeah, but I went with the ones I felt worked the best. Coming up next, though, is Terry, the pterodactyl, who was said to actually be one of Pee Wee's closest friends. I didn't want to go Aerodactyl, frankly, because I felt like maybe we could have done something a little bit different, but he's the only one that really fits a pterodactyl, sadly. Even like Archeops is not a pterodactyl, it's an Archaeopteryx. Now, that being said, there are non-puppet characters on the show as well, like Cowboy Carl, who was famously played by Lawrence Fishburne in his younger years. We don't really have a cowpoke Pokemon, but we do have a cow that is a boy, Tauros. So yeah, I think that can kind of be our Cowboy Carl substitute. Then coming in, we also have, I believe it was Sea Captain, what was his name? Sea Captain Carl, I think it was, or something like that. Basically, this grizzly old sea captain. Now, this one I found kind of interesting, because I'm like, okay, what can I do with that? A water type? Something like some grizzled sea Pokemon? There aren't actually a lot of Pokemon like that, so I'm like, what else can I do? I went with Delmise, because it is a haunted ghost anchor. Now, it's a ghost grass type, sure, but it's something you'd find on a shipwreck from a sea captain. It even has this little kelp, if you want to get technical, kelp beard on here. So I actually kind of like this as for his team. And it will also work towards the whole inanimate objects being his friends too. But he also has a dog, Roosevelt, who I couldn't find a picture of to kind of gauge what type of dog it would be. I went with Bulltown, because Bulltown is kind of like a really good example of man's best friend kind of dog. Very friendly, very active, very hyper. Last but not least, though, there is Jambi. I knew, hey, Jambi. Hi, Jambi. Yeah, I know. Jambi had to be on the team. But Jambi is a disembodied genie head that grants a wish once per episode. And that's kind of what keyed me into which Pokemon should do that. We actually have a couple Gin-based Pokemon. The Weather Quartet, like the Elemental Forces Quartet, are Gin-based. They are. We also have Hoopa, who is based off of Genie because you find him in the bottle. But so is Jirachi, and of those legendaries, Jirachi is the only one that is actually a wish-granting Pokemon. So Jirachi makes the most sense to me. And it makes sense that it's only once per episode, because allegedly it's once every 3,000 years he wakes up to grant a wish. So the question is then, how balanced is this team, and how well would this team actually do within the regions that you find it in, or with regions he'd be in? Well, how balanced is the team? This is actually one of those teams that doesn't do very well in the long run. Because you have two normal types right on the team, which means you have two Mon that immediately don't have a great strength record. Beyond that, it's got ×2 weakness to fighting, dark, ghost, rock, and ground, and a ×3 weakness to ice. The only trade-offs are ×2 weakness to ×2 strength against ice, flying, fighting, and rock. Sadly, the amount of repeats for how many types this team's strong against is actually not that great, which does lead us into how well does this team actually do. In Kanto, this team, the problem is I just never see you getting to blue. Against blue, you could have a shot, but the problem is very simple. You'll actually have no real issue with most of the gym leaders until you hit Giovanni. Giovanni being a rock ground specialist, mostly a ground specialist, but with having like Rhydon on the team, as well as Nidoqueen, Nidoking. It's first off, Bolttown's not going to be any use to you here, and Jirachi's also weak against ground as well. And a lot of his Mon hit hard. Beyond that, though, you have problems against every single Elite Four member in Kanto. Lorelai's an ice specialist with water mixed in there, which means your two Mon that actually have any sort of strength against ice are going to really be struggling. Not to mention that even though you have Boltton, most of her Mon are water, but Bolttown, well, actually, surprisingly, isn't bad. I used it in one of my playthroughs. It's only going to be able to do so much, and then she'll just bring out something like a Jinx that will have a firm counter to it. Then you got to deal with Bruno, who you just don't have many good answers for. This team's not good against fighting types all that much, so bring Jirachi out and hope for the best. Agatha is a ghost type trainer, which means you're now in a very weird position because your one Mon that's strong against ghost is also weak against them. Two of your Mon are immune, but also none of their normal moves are going to do anything. Your Bolttown can maybe take care of the Golbats, and Jirachi's immune to the poison. That's a real touch and go fight. And then you only got one Mon who's strong against Dragon, and that's a fairly weak Dragon compared to the Dragonites. And then with Blue, you got to get through half of his team in order to have any real chance. You start with Cyclizar, swap out, go into, do your best with Cyclizar, quite frankly, then bring out Bolttown and then take down the Pidgeot. Do your best against the Alakazam and then bring out the Dhelmise. Dhelmise has huge attack stats and defense stats. It's just slow as hell. It's only got a base 40 speed. And then you got to deal with the Rhydon. If you could get past, in theory, those first three Mon, you'd have a fairly solid shot, but it's going to cost you a lot. So it's a very tentative maybe. And Johto, honestly, the only real issue I can see forming here is maybe Karen in the Elite Four before you get to Lance. And just because you don't really have any strength against dark types on this team, whereas you have two Mon weak to it. Other than that, though, Lance is kind of a no-go. You're just not going to get past Lance. His 3 Dragonites alone would make mincemeat of this team. Not to mention Charizard to deal with two of your Grass, Ghost, and your Psychic Steel. He's also got Gyarados. He's also got Aerodactyl of his own. Hoenn, you really wouldn't have that much issue until you get to Norman. I could see Watson being a little problematic though. Even though Dragon resists electric, he's got Magnetons. So and Aerodactyl is still weak to electric. So I could see Watson being a bit of an issue. But Norman though, because he's normal, you don't have any fighting types on this team. And they have to deal with the Slackings. And that's not going to be fun. The only upside is, Dhelmise is weak as immune to normal. The rest of the region isn't too difficult until you get to the Elite Four, where you stop, I think, either at Glacia, who again, Bulltown, but she's got more than enough ice to kind of deal with it. Even if you get past her, I think you're stopped at Drake. He's just got too rounded of a dragon team with only one dragon on your team, and not a strong one. And then even still, Steven, I don't personally think you could get past Steven. You just don't have firm answers for Steel or even Rock on this team. And that's completely what his team's about. In Sinnoh, you'd frankly be stopped right at Rorik, because he has 3 mon, a Geodude, a Onyx, and that Rampardos. And that Rampardos is probably getting either a bulldoze or a headbutt off, and that thing hits like a truck. And that's just a Craniados, not even a Rampardos. I guess I said Rampardos, but Craniados is what I meant. So you're just going to stop there. So the question is, could you have beaten Cynthia regardless? And I'm going to be flat out honest. No, I don't think so. The Spiritomb alone is going to be tricky to get through. The Delmise is going to be weak to it. You have no Fairy on the team. Then you got to deal with the Roserade, which is actually going to be able to handle a lot of the mon on this team. So your best bet is probably either Aerodactyl because it's neutral, or Jirachi. But then Gastrodon could also get through a lot of this team as well. Again, Delmise is maybe your best bet if it's still around. Then Milotic, who's also just has Ice Beam on that thing, which means it can take the Delmise down, and it will. It's far faster. Not to mention Lucario, who can easily take down 2 of your mon, no problem. And then you have Garchik. You just can't. You would not beat Cynthia in the least. Well, what about Unova? Surprisingly, in Unova, I think you could get through most of the gym challenges. A couple of Elite Four members got some type advantages on you, but it's relatively fine. But surprisingly, Alder is a no-go for this team. Because weirdly enough, the only mon you have on this team that's any good against Bug is Aerodactyl. And because of the order we have this in, you'd start with Dragapult. Selgor would come in, do some damage. You probably would switch into Aerodactyl because any Bug moves just wouldn't work on him. Okay, so you take down the Selgor. Great, wonderful. Here we go. Buffalon then comes out. I believe that would have been his next mon. Either Druddigon, Buffalon, or Vanillix. And this is where it gets tricky, because Aerodactyl is fast, but except for Vanillix, it doesn't have a type advantage. The long and short of it comes down to this. Aerodactyl isn't surviving long enough to beat Volcarona, or to fight Volcarona, because it doesn't really have a strong type advantage against. It doesn't have a type advantage against Druddigon or Buffalon. Those guys are going to deal some damage. And then nothing on this team has any fire moves to deal with Excavalier. So that's just going to be a drawn-out fight. And then at that point, you're at least down half your team, probably Aerodactyl included. And then Volcarona comes out, gets a Quiver Dance off, and that's good night Irene right there. So no go there. Well, what about in Kalos? You should be able to handle the first gym, no problem. But right after that, you got to deal with Grant, who's a rock type, who has a rock ice type, which you don't actually have a really good answer for, except for maybe Aerodactyl has a rock move on it. And then Tyrantrum, which is their rock dragon type, which would be able to take down the Cyclozar without too much issue. But because you do have some type advantage against it, you might be able to get past them. What you can't get past, though, is freaking Karina. Now, you might be saying, well, you have Aerodactyl on the team. Why can't you? Well, the simple answer is Tauros and Cyclozar are going down so quickly that the other three mon are just going to be able to whittle down Aerodactyl. I used an Aerodactyl on my last playthrough of X and Y, and I liked it. I actually liked playing with the Aerodactyl. Doesn't mean that just because the Halocha's fighting type, it doesn't actually have Aerodactyl. I think has Wing Attack as its go-to flying move. It doesn't have Aerial Ace at that time. I'm re-looking at that right now to be sure. But let's just, for the sake of argument, say Aerodactyl is in fact enough. It's enough to get past it. Let's just go under that that idea for a moment. Okay, well now we're going into Ramos. That one you should be okay with. Same with Clement. Honestly, most of the remaining gym leaders you should be fine with. Wolfram, though, surprisingly would be tricky because you got Aerodactyl, yes, which its rock typing is strong against the ice, but the ice is also strong against its flying, and Jirachi is also strong against ice. But then that means you gotta get through the Elite Four. You don't have any good options against Drantha, except for Cyclozar, who's not that strong. You got Delmise for the water, but even then, he's was that Wingstrom? No, that's I always forget that one's name. Clavalier or something like that. Flava, fire. This team's not good against fire. Yeah, Aerodactyl can put some work in, but still. And steel. This team is not good against steel whatsoever. So Wingstrom would be a severe problem for this team. Aerodactyl's no longer got the winning advantage. Then you got to deal with freaking Diantha. Hawlucha will just, flying press, take out, or get a set up a Swords Dance. Gives you at least enough time to go into Aerodactyl. Or actually probably go into Jirachi, because that way you can resist the fighting moves and the flying with the flying press. Get some psychic off. Okay, that's taken care of. Tyrantrum comes in, though. Even though steel resists rock, that thing's either going to head smash or whatever, and you no longer have a type advantage. I think you might take the Tyrantrum down, but it's very likely that Jirachi is either going to be on the lowest health you can have it at, or it's dead. Aurorus, for the first time in a while, you don't have a times 4 advantage. You do have still steel without Jirachi or Aerodactyl, but Aurorus might actually be getting a hit in. And then Gudra now is a tank. Then Gorgai, surprisingly, is actually good against this team because it's a ghost and grass. I mean, it actually hits all these guys in some capacity, either neutrally or with special damage. And then, Mega Gardevoir would cleave through the rest of this team. So it's a no-go in Kalos. What about Galar? Galar's one where really there's no one gym that would really hurt this team. No one gym that would really do it. Again, Raihan is actually a pretty capable team to deal with, or has a pretty capable team. There's also an argument that maybe B could take care of like 2 of your team members, but then doesn't have a strong answer for Aerodactyl or Delmise. But really it comes down to Leon. Yeah, you're not beating Leon. Cyclozar is no good against that Aegislash, which, if I remember correctly, does have Sacred Sword on it. Again, I always forget if it does, but I'm pretty sure it has a physical move on it. And once Cyclozar goes down, I mean, maybe going into Delmise could be beneficial, especially if Aegislash is no longer in defensive mode. Because, again, 120 attack is no joke. That is a huge hitting Pokemon. So maybe it takes it down, and then you're screwed. Because then you got to go up against the Dragon Ball, who would Flamethrower or Shadow Ball that Delmise into oblivion. It could Thunderbolt the Aerodactyl, and then it just uses whatever, Flamethrower or Shadow Ball the Jirachi, and then just use some neutral moves against the other 2. Yeah, no, you're done against Leon. And then finally in Paldea, Katie is a bit of a problem because that Nimble has double kick. If you could take the Nimble down, though, you could win. So I'll give that a pass. You're good against Brassius. Iono, though, is a little bit of a problem. Because, yeah, you have Aerodactyl, which is probably your heaviest hitter at this point. But it's a flying type, and it's weak to electricity. The first few flying mon on the team, though, you should be fine against. You also have Shed Tail on that Cyclozar. So you can swap it out, get rid of the status condition, all that. But, man, that Miss Magius, for at that point in the game, if that's their 3rd gym, which is supposed to be if you look at the leveling, that thing hits hard. Has no weakness once it terastallizes. And, yeah, man, it literally has a combo of Confuse Ray, Charge Beam, and Hex on it. Hex doubles the damage done to a Pokemon with a status condition. Like, and Confusion counts as that. So it's got like a perfect move setup. If you hypothetically could get to Gita, though, could you win? This is one of those cases where I'm not sure, because she starts with Epathra. Yeah, Cyclozar could probably take the Epathra down. You don't have to waste the Delmise. The Veluza, though, probably would end up taking the Cyclozar down, which then you bring in Delmise, who has complete advantage over that. So, okay, Veluza goes down. Then comes out the Go-Go, because she doesn't bring out the Mon. Again, the AI is not the greatest on like a lot of gym leaders, or champions or gym leaders. They bring out their Mon in a particular sequence. Unfortunately, you either got to go Jirachi for the resistance or Aerodactyl for like a type advantage against the Go-Go. But then comes the King Gambit, which you just do not have an answer for. It's dark, which means it's immune to Jirachi's psychic. It's steel, which means it's immune to grass, resistant to grass, flying, whatever. Like, no mon here is going to hit it for neutral damage. I think, save for maybe Boltown? Or no, there's like no neutral. You are going to like lose a giant chunk of your team trying to take this thing down. And then you still got to deal with Avalugg, which at that point, depending on who you have left, you're screwed. And then you got to deal with Glamora, which, again, never understood why that was her ace. King Gambit frankly makes a lot more sense to be your ace. But anyway, I mean, yeah, it's a fun team, but it's not a good team. Which kind of, fits Pee Wee Herman to a T in many ways. Because I think Paul Rubin decided, oh yeah, he's all the innocence, he's all the innocence of like a child that's being piloted by an incubus, the pure definition of evil. That was a quote I found as looking up Pee Wee Herman images. But yeah, Pee Wee Herman. That's my thoughts. What do you think? Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see you next time.